Stewart Purvis is Professor of Television Journalism at City University in London, a role that he's held since 2003. From 2007 to 2010, he was also a partner for content and standards for UK media regulator Ofcom. But Purvis made his name during a 31-year stint at news broadcaster ITN, which he ran for more than a decade as editor-in-chief and then chief executive. I'm pleased to say Stewart Purvis joins me in the studio now. Stewart, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. So I wanted to start by asking about the latest developments, resignation of Britain's top police officer, and I guess, you know, the thing that we've been really hearing more and more about over the course of the weekend is this concern or this disillusionment, not just in the politicians and the press, which many would expect, but now concern about the role of the police in all of this.
I think so. I mean, I think the extraordinary thing is that not only that Britain's top policeman has resigned, but actually he's had a parting shot at the Prime Minister on his way out. I mean, he's basically clearly annoyed by certain things that the Prime Minister is alleged to have said about him, so he's in a sense hit back. And essentially what he's saying is, look, I hired a former News of the World guy, but actually so did you. So I'm having to resign because, you know, of what I did. How about what you did? Now that's a most unusual situation, and I think that's what the chatter is at Westminster. The political classes are all seeing today. You know, the Prime Minister was always sort of connected with this because he appointed the former editor of News of the World as his, you know, communications advisor. But is there something more to this? I mean, is there something we haven't yet heard about, some connection between what's been going on and the Prime Minister himself?
It seems that the crisis is getting, I mean, as we speak about with Rebecca Brooks's resignation, the Murdochs now being increasingly exposed, increasingly vulnerable, it seems that the Prime Minister himself is also, that the crisis is moving closer to his door as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's coming back from the Prime Minister's office is, but you, the police, are meant to be investigating these guys, so how come you appointed one of their, what used to be one of their executives at the same time you're investigating them? But actually, you know, I think there's an argument either way, but I say it's an extraordinary sort of encapsulation of what's been going on, the way so many people in the British establishment appear to be involved. But I mean, you could argue this is a very British angle on it. I suppose the global angle is still, what's the future of News Corp? What's the impact on News Corp of what's been going on in Britain? Yeah,
and no doubt investors and shareholders, well, on both sides of the Atlantic, are going to be watching the questioning of the Murdochs in Parliament tomorrow on Tuesday. What does Murdoch need to say to the committee?
Well, I think there's two or three different things. First of all, what exactly is he going to say and what is he not going to say? He does have the right not to answer questions if he thinks, well, I think in America they call taking a fifth. He could have his lawyer alongside him who's constantly advising him. That never looks good, let's be honest. But on the other hand, he has got rights like any other citizen. Then there's a question of how does he appear? We don't often see Rupert Murdoch, you know, do a stand-up piece. He gave a lecture in London a few months ago. Frankly, it wasn't terribly impressive in its presentation style. So people will be thinking, does he look like he's on top of this? Here's a man who only a few days ago was saying they'd only made minor mistakes. Now he's putting adverts in the paper saying, I'm sorry. So, you know, how does he present himself in general? How does his son present himself, given that he is not only the deputy chief operating officer of the company, effectively the sort of number 3 man in the company, but he's also the chairman of Sky B, the company we're trying to take over. He's got a lot to win and lose, so it's a big day.
It's a big day, isn't it? And I mean, you know, speaking about their efforts to get on top of things, I mean, just looking at it from an investor point of view, I mean, they're going to be questioning their sort of crisis management skills in all of this, because there has been a sense that they've been backtracking. You know, there have been questions asked as to why Rebecca Brooks didn't stand down earlier, and now with the Murdochs going before Parliament, I mean, I'm just wondering about News Corp's strategy, you know, the printing of this apology in the paper. I mean, what does this say about the way they've dealt with this crisis?
Well, I suppose, you know, in the months to come, this will take over from BP as a case study of how not to do it. Certainly in the early stages, it looked completely disorganised. What seemed to happen is that somehow there was a moment last week, back end of last week, and they thought, come on, let's get a grip of this. We're told that more professional public affairs people were brought in, and there does now appear to be a plan. It's a plan that leads up to tomorrow's appearance before the Commons Committee. But of course, in a sense, once Rupert and James Murdoch sit in that chair, no PR advice is going to matter. It's how they actually answer the questions. Do they look straight? Do they look honest? Do they look evasive? Do they look shifty?
And in terms of regulation for the press, I mean, you know, we heard Prime Minister David Cameron speaking about the need for a complete overhaul. Give me your thoughts, your views on this. You know, many voices saying, listen, you can't have a situation where the press effectively are judge and juror for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's perhaps a little unfair, because in a sense most countries have a model where the press, examine themselves. I don't think you can immediately dismiss that idea. The fact is, the exact status quo we have in Britain of press self-regulation, even the people who run it say it's had its day. What would replace it? What I thought was interesting of the weekend, lots of newspapers running editorials saying, don't you dare touch our freedoms. In other words, the kind of blast back from the media now is, don't get so excited about this phone hacking stuff that you take away these core British media freedoms, which have been so important and so admired around the world.
What about the issue of cross-ownership of media? I mean, do you think that now there will be increasing scrutiny of that? Because it seems, even before this scandal erupted, there were questions about plurality, about, about conflict of interest, with the takeover of Sky B. I mean, is this going to be something that's more closely looked at, allowing newspapers to get bigger and bigger?
Yeah, I'm sure that is. We've got this almost giant inquiry under a law lord here, a judge, and that's one of the items on their agenda. I think even if he hadn't been asked to look at it, it was going to come back anyway. There is a communications coming up in Britain in a few years' time. I was involved, as you say, at the British media regulator when this last came up, and there was a kind of feeling of it's all terribly complicated. Let's this is not from inside, but from the pressures from outside. I have a feeling that it's going to have to be looked at again.